A lot of people think that they're stuck because they don't know what they want, but very often the opposite is true. They know exactly what they want, but that desire never leaves their imagination. And that happens for a lot of reasons, one of them being that many spiritual traditions often are interpreted as saying that desire is the root of suffering, that we should not want. But those ideas are actually often pretty misunderstood. What happens when we believe that is that we start looking and attacking desire itself. We start believing that the problem is desire. So then we feel selfish for wanting something more from our lives. We feel too attached to the material world. We feel unspiritual. But Buddhism in particular differentiates two very distinct type of desires. And that makes all the difference. In Buddhism, there is one type of desire called tanha and another called chanda. Tanha means craving, chanda means aspiration. Let's talk about tanha. Tanha is the type of desire that is often the root of suffering. It is outcome fixated and driven by alleviating discomfort. It is a compulsive action to get something, to feel better, right? So this is where people get addicted to thoughts, addicted to food, addicted to substances, addicted to people, because they're trying to feel something that they don't feel like they have in that moment. Chanda, aspiration, comes from the Latin word breath. This is a desire to participate in something meaningful. It's effort for effort's sake because of enjoyment or belief or meaning. Aspiration is not outcome fixated. It's a desire to be present in the moment. So craving imagines outcome, while aspiration participates in the process. I recently made a video called The Shadow of Surrender where I talk about the shadow of surrender and how surrender can become avoidance often. So if you haven't watched that, I'll have that link below because this is kind of the next step of that is why does surrender often become avoidance? Because so many of us feel like it is safer to have our desires stuck in fantasy for a lot of reasons, one of them being that we feel guilty about wanting more. We feel guilty. We feel like we're not worthy of wanting more for our lives. But desires keep us stuck when they live in this fantasy, and they can actually liberate us when they become lived behavior. Now, there are three steps to making desires come alive in our lives, and we'll talk about that in another video. But let's talk about how you can tell the difference between these two things, because this is often what keeps us stuck in our lives and from achieving our dreams and moving toward them and feeling like we are allowed to move toward them. So, there are three things that are really important in understanding what is coming through craving and what is coming through aspiration. The first tool is contemplation, which is extended periods of time in which you are really just thinking deeply about life. It's like this space between thinking and meditating, slowing down enough to observe what's actually happening in our minds and in our thoughts and in our patterns. Number two is breath or body awareness. Craving often creates a sense of tension and tightness, specifically mentally and in the body. And knowing that the root word of aspiration is the Latin word for breath reminds us that we can practice by noticing our breath. So we can practice in meditation, but we can also just practice listening to our body, which speaks to us through sensation and noticing when we're moving towards something that feels like it is tension or constriction versus something that feels open and light. And then there are two questions that I've written down that will be really helpful for you to identify which one is this. What kind of desire is this actually? Is this desire changing my behavior or just my imagination? If the answer is just your imagination, then you know that it's probably more of a craving. Question number two is, am I willing to participate in the process even if the outcome is not guaranteed? If the answer is no, then you probably have an understanding that this is actually craving as well. If the answer is yes, that sounds more aspirational. Now, Gil Fronsdale says something that I think is really important. He says, Craving and clinging are often tied to the world of planning, thinking, and fantasy, while aspiration is associated with inner stillness and relaxation. One way aspiration becomes craving is through expectation. At its best, aspiration has an openness to possibility without a need for anything to happen. In my video, The Shadow of Surrender, at the very end, I asked a question and I said, I made a video, I spent about 4 hours on it. Actually, it was a little bit more with planning. And I ended up having to scrap it because the audio wasn't good and I just didn't think it was a good quality video to put on my channel. And I asked you guys, do you think that was a waste of effort? And most of you guys in the comments, everyone in the comments said, no, it's not a waste of effort. You learned, and this is the part of the process. And I love that. And the reason why I asked that question was because this is how we know that we are ready to do something that is aspirational. That we know there will be times, because as a content creator, I can tell you that's not the first, second, third, fourth, fifth time that's happened or something similar, right? For whatever reason, tons of hours go into something and then it ends up not working out for whatever reason. Let me know, anyone out there, any artist, anyone who is an entrepreneur, anything, what is the longest time that you spent on something that you've then had to just completely scrap? Or like, how often does this happen for you? My creatives out there, how often does that happen for you? Because I know for myself, it's not all the time, but it does happen. And every single time, it's a reminder for me to let go of the expectations, to try my best, knowing that sometimes there are things I just cannot control. I am running a live 5-week program called Creative Rewilding in April, where we're going to be talking about how we can bring this creativity to life. But this is a huge part of that process, is understanding what desires we actually have, and are we willing to move with them, even if that means that they're not going to work out the way that we planned, because we can change and adjust. So if that sounds interesting to you, this live program that I'm running, Creative Rewilding, about taking action on our creative endeavors, between now and then would be a really great time to start practicing. What is it that I really enjoy doing? Noticing the breath, noticing this contemplation. And the last thing I want to ask you is, what made you believe that you are not worthy of fulfilling your deepest desires? I think for a lot of us, especially if we're sensitives or empaths, we tend to believe that if there is suffering in the world, that we cannot then fulfill our desires. Once again, this is part of the trap of this idea that desire is the cause of suffering. In fact, the Buddha often says that ignorance is the true cause of suffering, and ignorance leads to all sorts of things like cravings. This tradition that has been around for so long, and many other spiritual traditions as well, are saying desire has never been the problem. It's been the desires that are trying to replace something that love and connection and community and all of these other things are, and presence and devotion, we're replacing those things with our desires. That's when they become harmful to us. And in fact, not following your desires in a lot of ways is withholding your creative contribution to the world. And your creative contribution is a huge part of what you came here to express, what you came here to contribute to the world and to offer. So in this way, your desires, when they come from aspiration, open and uplift not just your own body, but the energy and the bodies of those around you and around them. Let me know down below if you have discovered that some of your desires may have actually been cravings. And if there are any aspirational desires that after listening to this, you're like, no, this is an aspirational desire. I'm willing to put the work in, even if I don't know what it looks like on the outside, because the desires that transform our lives are the ones that reorganize our behaviors. Right? And this is why I do so much work on nervous system capacity, because that's a huge piece of our lives, being able to hold the desires and the life that we want. What desire are you willing to pursue that will have to reorganize how you act? That is how you know that it's a desire worth pursuing. Thanks so much for being here. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Helps my channel so much. And join my newsletter, join my Substack, stay connected. And I'll see you next time.